The sun-kissed shores of the Australian coast were more than just a backdrop. They were a character in the story, a witness to the raw, unfiltered emotions that had always lurked beneath the surface of Roz and Lil's lives. It was a paradise, a place where time seemed to slow down, allowing you to feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, the salty breeze in your hair, and hear the gentle roar of the ocean. A constant whisper of possibilities, a place where their journey had started. It was a place where these two women had been inseparable since their early childhoods. Roz, with her wild bohemian spirit and a mane of unruly blonde curls, and Lil, with her quiet strength and her sun-kissed complexion, were two sides of a coin, two pieces of the same puzzle, and they were always drawn to one another, like two magnets whose opposite sides had finally connected. They'd shared everything, scraped knees and scraped hearts, whispered secrets under starry skies, and the unspoken understanding that only comes between two soulmates who were not always destined to be together. And it was their children that had cemented the ties of their friendship, making them not just friends, but family. They had loved both boys as their own, and they had always seemed to come out of the other end, as better people, because of each other. But life, as it so often does, had thrown them a curveball in the form of Lil's husband's sudden death. The loss left her reeling, adrift in a sea of grief and uncertainty. And it was Roz, always the steady rock, who had stepped in to guide her through the storm, their friendship deepening into something more profound. This newfound closeness created a space where things had began to change, where the glances became longer, the laughter a little more hushed, and where desire began to awaken where it had been hiding. They had never talked about it, but they had both felt it, the unspoken need for a closeness that had nothing to do with friendship. The fire, hidden deep down within their hearts, had been awakened, and now there was no going back. It was at this point that the boys began to grow up, their gazes, now more mature, turning towards their mothers with an appreciation that had more to do with desire than it had with love. It had all become a mess, and they had all become trapped in their own desires and fears. It was during those warm summer months, as the heat beat down on them relentlessly, that they had all started to become aware of the changes that had begun to happen between them. It all was new, intense, and terrifying, and none of them knew how to stop it, nor if they even wanted to stop it. Years passed, filled with stolen moments, hushed conversations, and a longing that grew with every passing day. Roz and Lil found themselves constantly pulled into each other's orbits, their bodies practically vibrating as they'd be together. They tried to ignore it. They tried to deny it, but the energy was too strong, and they knew deep down that they were both at the precipice, ready to jump into whatever the future might bring. Then, as if out of nowhere, Nancy had returned to town. A school friend of Roz's, she had suddenly appeared in town after living in London for many years. The two old friends had always felt a certain kinship with each other, and they had finally reconnected after decades of being out of touch. It had felt comfortable, easy. It was as if they had never been apart. There was an understanding and intimacy that came with their years of friendship. And as they started spending time together, laughing, sharing, they realized that they had both changed, just as they had stayed the same. And as the days rolled by, they knew something was brewing, something that they had to address, and it wasn't just between them. On the surface, Nancy Stokes, at 60 years old, had it all. Successful business as a realtor, a lovely home in the affluent suburbs of Los Angeles, and a life that was both secure and stable. Yet, behind those perfectly constructed walls, she was a volcano, ready to erupt with the force of all the feelings that she had tried to ignore. Her relationship with her husband had always been rather dull, if not stagnant, and after he'd passed away from cancer, she had felt as if all of her passions, all of her desires, had died with him. She tried to fill that gap with work and a sense of duty, but nothing ever truly satisfied her. So, when a new client had walked into her office, young, gorgeous, and full of confidence, she knew she needed to do something. She had felt that pull, that magnetic force drawing her in, and she'd suddenly felt as if she was a teenage girl, with a raging case of hormones and everything about it, both terrified and intrigued her. His profile had been intense and captivating, almost as if it was written specifically for her, and as she read his descriptions, she knew that she was lost. He was an escort, one who did not just focus on the physical, but one that delved deep into the emotions, and her heart had told her that she had to get in contact with him. And she had. Booking his time was the easy part, as she had a credit card and the desire to explore all that had been forbidden to her. It was only when she had started driving towards the hotel room where they were set to meet that she realized what she had done. What was she? An older widow doing meeting with an escort? Her breath had caught as she'd walked into the room and seen the young man with his lean frame and kind eyes, and she knew that nothing in her life was going to be the same. Leo Grande was waiting for her, a smile gracing his lips, and all she could do was fall into the feelings that she had been trying to avoid for most of her life. It was forbidden, she knew it was, but she had to do it, if only to know if she still had some life left in her. Their first conversation had been awkward, both of them unsure of how to proceed, but it had been that awkwardness that seemed to bind them closer together. He'd explained that he was just there to help her explore her desires, but he didn't say it with a hint of anything other than genuine enthusiasm. He had wanted to help her, not as a client, but as another human being. She was intrigued, she was flattered, and she was terrified. What she had wanted was simple, to be seen as more than just the labels that other people had given her, to be more than just a mother, or a teacher, a wife, or a widow. She wanted to be Nancy, raw, unadulterated, and completely human. It was a confession that he seemed to have understood, and so, with that confession, they had began their dance, both of them knowing that there would be no going back. Their encounters grew in intensity with each passing meeting, as did their feelings, and she found herself asking him questions about what it was to truly connect. She was also starting to want him for who he was, and not just the escort she had wanted him to be. They were both, in a way, exploring uncharted territories, and it was wonderful, dangerous, and intoxicating. During one of these conversations, as they were lying in bed, their bodies entwined, Leo began to confess to her that his love for older women was more than just a job, that it was something he had always longed for, that he wanted nothing more than to be cherished by someone who had the wisdom and the compassion to see the real him. Nancy knew that this was wrong, that she was letting her feelings get the better of her, but for the first time, it had finally felt right. She was finally doing something for herself, and it had made her feel empowered, despite knowing that it would all eventually come to an end. The journey to self-discovery wasn't a straight path for either of them, as it was filled with hidden landmines, deep-seated insecurities, and a looming sense of dread. That all good things had to come to an end, and nothing could last forever. But the spark had been ignited, and there was no putting out the fire now. As the days progressed, it had become clear that both Nancy and Leo were struggling with what they had started. For Nancy, the shame of being with a man so much younger than herself had begun to settle like a heavy blanket, making it difficult for her to sleep, or to even look at herself in the mirror. She knew this was wrong, but she could not find the strength to walk away. Leo, on the other hand, found himself getting lost in her world, a world that was filled with complicated emotional baggage. He knew that this wasn't a love affair, but he also knew that he had started to love Nancy in his own way, despite it all. He had never been given such an emotional connection before, and he was now addicted to it, even if it was all wrong. The truth, they both knew, would eventually reveal itself. And it did, in a way they never could have expected. After another intimate encounter, while they were getting ready to leave, Nancy accidentally dropped a handmade card, one that she had created that showcased all the things that she had wanted to experience. Leo had grabbed it, and a knowing smile had formed on his lips. He knew what was coming. "Is this real?" he had asked, and before she could answer, he began to list them, his eyes never leaving her gaze. A secret encounter, passionate sex, intimacy. He'd looked up at her then, his expression almost teasing. And someone that will not abandon me ever? She was lost then, and she didn't know if she was going to make it out alive. Their story was now written, not as an exploration of sex, but as a journey into the heart of their own demons and what they needed to be able to move on. Nancy knew then that it was over. She was tired, and the guilt was now suffocating her. It was only a matter of time before it would all come crashing down around them. The story culminates at their last official meeting, where, despite their best attempts at playing it casual, they could feel the unspoken words and unsaid confessions hanging between them, filling the silence with a dread that made it harder to breathe. This time, however, instead of succumbing to the call of their desires, they decided to do the one thing they had both been too scared to do, to put an end to it all. It was an act of both love and sacrifice, a realization that some loves are simply meant to be. "I have to let you go," Nancy said, her voice small as she finally accepted the truth. "This is wrong, Leo. You are younger than my own son, and I can't keep doing this to us." "I never meant to hurt you," he'd said, his voice low and with something in his eyes that she couldn't read. "I only wanted to see you free." It was then, as she had looked at his young and beautiful face, that she understood what was happening, and why, no matter how much she loved him, that she had to go. For her, their story had always been about self-discovery, about finally taking a hold of her own life and living it the way that she had always dreamt of. "It's time," she whispered, and he had kissed her one last time before she had simply left. In the aftermath of their final encounter, both Nancy and Leo embarked on new journeys of self-discovery. Nancy, with her newfound self-assurance, finally took on a new lover, someone her own age, someone who would not trigger her insecurities, as she now knew that her happiness and her joy came from within. She was finally free, she was finally happy, and most importantly, she had accepted herself for all that she was and all that she had wanted to be. Leo, on the other hand, now more sensitive to the needs of his clients, finally made peace with his job as he learned that what he truly offered was not sex, but love and understanding, and he would carry those lessons with him everywhere he went. This was a story of self-discovery, one of freedom, a tale that had been told in the hushed whispers of passionate desire and the transformative power of vulnerability and understanding. And in the end, they had both come out on the other side as completely new people. It's now up to you to decide where they would all go next, and if, by some miracle, they might find each other again. This is a story that would stay with you for many years to come.